So before we begin, can you see in your screen? Not yet. I will share my screen. Okay. Can you see in your screen, class, the prayer? Mr. Kevin?
Yes, sir.
Can you? Okay. So before we begin, let us start with a prayer. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen and amen. Okay. So, class, good morning. In today's topic, once again, we will be discussing the Medical Ethics Manual from the World Medical Association. Okay? So last time, class, we have discussed Chapter 1, the principal features of medical ethics. Okay? So today, we will be discussing Chapter 2, Physicians and Patients. Okay? So the first few principles we will skip because I already discussed this with the previous class earlier. So we will skip and we will go directly to the issues regarding the beginning of life issues, end of life issues, and to the case study. Okay? So because of the length of the lecture class and we have only limited time, so more often than not, the topics, we cannot finish it. So the recordings last time, I will just post it in my YouTube channel. Okay? So that you can access it anytime. So please class, tell your friends, your classmates to share, like, and subscribe our YouTube channel because it is where I upload my notes, my lecture for the benefit of medical students. Okay, you can access the lecture any time of the day, anywhere, and also in order to increase our community. Okay, community of frontliners, community of soon to be doctors. Okay, dedicated medical students. Okay. So without further ado, let's go to the topic 7. Okay. So we go directly to the issues with regards to life. Beginning of life issues. Okay. What concepts are involved with regards to this issue? Okay, this dilemma. So many of the most prominent issues in medical ethics relate to the beginning of human life. Okay? So before class, in our preliminary discussions, okay, we already discussed that life as a form of right is at the top. Okay? The right to life is the highest right. Okay? So in the Philippines, there are hierarchies of rights. The right to property, the right to privacy, the right to livelihood, the right to remain silent. Okay? So in the hierarchy of rights, the right to life is the highest. Okay? Because life itself class is a class of its own. Okay? Life is important. Life is essential. Without life, there is only nothingness, oblivion, darkness, okay? Silence, deafening silence. Life is light. Life is love. Life is eternal, okay? Life is the opposite of evil. It's like the opposite of darkness is light. So, life, the opposite of evil is life. Okay? Evil means death. Okay? So, that is why it is a generally accepted principle, not just in the Philippines, but in the entire globe, that the highest right is the right to life. Okay? So, let's discuss some principles with regards to life. Okay? The limited scope of this manual means that these issues cannot be treated in detail here, but it is worth listing them so that they can be recognized as ethical in nature and dealt with as such. Okay, so we'll just make a rundown class because we cannot discuss all principle in its entirety. Okay, we'll just touch the basic. Okay, have a discussion with regards to the pros and cons of the ethical standards, the legal implications, and so on and so forth. Each of them has been the subject of extensive analysis by medical associations, ethicists, and government advisory bodies. And in many countries, there are laws, regulation, policies dealing with them. So, more often than not, class, this is a case-to-case basis because laws in the Philippines are different in the laws of other countries. For example, abortion. Here in the Philippines, abortion is illegal. You will be imprisoned. However, in the other countries, abortion is accepted, especially medical abortion. In the Philippines, euthanasia or mercy killing is frowned upon by law. So when you say frowned upon, it is illegal, not accepted. Okay? The other hand, in other countries, in a limited sense, it is accepted for, again, medical reasons. Okay? So, as a doctor, especially our school, who has 15 nationalities, different nationalities, more or less, okay? Indians, Filipino, Arabians, Chinese, Koreans, Nepalese, Nigerian, okay? Thailander, um, and others, okay? So, as a global, our center of learning is of global scope because of these different nationalities. Okay? So, we must treat it, the topic, as a case-to-case basis. Okay? I apply the Philippine law because, of course, first, we are in the Philippines, and second, your teacher is a Filipino. Okay? So, first, contraception. Although there is increasing international recognition of a woman's right to control her fertility, including the prevention of unwarranted pregnancies, physicians still have to deal with the difficult issues such as requests for contraceptives from minors and explaining risk of different method of contraception. Okay? Though contraception is an accepted practice here in the Philippines, but as a physician, you should side, okay, with caution. Class, you must be cautious because contraceptives are being used in a widespread manner that sometimes it is abused, okay? Even minors, okay? Human traffickers, okay? They use contraceptive. And other individuals where they abuse contraceptives. So as a medical doctor, you must conduct, okay, background check. Your treatment must be based on factual findings, okay, laboratory findings, physical findings, okay. All your preventive measures or medical measures or promotive measure must be based on facts. Okay? Next, assisted reproduction. Because this is widely accepted now, class, even in the Philippines. However, assisted reproduction in the Philippines, the technology is still at its infancy. Okay? Still very early. So technology-wise, not yet. But it is not frowned upon by law. Actually, it is encouraged, especially for couples who have problem reproducing. Okay? So, though it is not prohibited, but still, it is still limited because of the technology not yet present. So, for couples and individuals who cannot conceive naturally, there are various techniques of assisted reproduction, such as artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization and embryo transfer, widely available in major medical centers. Okay, so these types of policies, class, or technology, there are ethical consideration that a doctor is duty bound to uphold. Okay, all these topics: contraception, assisted reproduction, prenatal genetic screening, and so on and so forth. With the policy or the program comes medical issues or ethical issues. Okay, so doctors, physicians must be cautious at all times. Okay, for example, surrogate or substitute gestation is another alternative. So of course, when you surrogate someone, it means you use a third person. So there are legal implications also. What if you're married? In the Philippines, if you have sex with another person other than your wife or husband, then of course, you committed a criminal act. Okay? So none of these techniques is unproblematic, either in the individual cases or for public policy. So in 2006, the World Medical Association statement on assistive reproductive technologies notes that while consensus can be reached on some issues, there remain fundamental difference of opinion that cannot be resolved. Okay? Remember, class, that like what I said earlier, it is a case-to-case basis because it is not just the law, okay, of the country, but also its religious background or religious belief. Okay? Example, here in the Philippines where most individuals are Christians. Okay? So there are beliefs that run counters to the technology which are present, which can be utilized, okay, in reproduction. So that's why as doctors, you need to be cautious. You need to have a holistic approach. So by holistic approach, you just you don't. I mean, by holistic approach, it means that you study or you collect data not just on the medical background, but as a whole. Okay, the spiritual, the medical, mental, okay, physical, and so on and so forth. So the statement identifies areas of agreement and also highlights those matters on which agreement cannot be reached. Okay? So like what I said earlier, depending on the country, um, people cannot reach a consensus because of these differences, religious differences, legal differences, and so on and so forth. So as physicians, it is incumbent upon you to be cautious. Tread with caution. Okay? Prenatal genetic screening. Genetic tests are now available for determining whether an embryo or a fetus is affected by certain genetic abnormalities and whether it is male or female. Okay, so there's a technology that determines the status of the fetus. Okay, not just its gender, but also its biological background. Okay, so depending on the findings, a decision can be made whether or not to proceed with pregnancy. Physician need to determine when to offer such tests and how to explain results to patient. Okay, so an ethical issue arises in this situation. Because what if upon test, it can be determined that there are problems in the genetics of that fetus or at its early infancy. Okay? So you need to determine the background also of the person. Because if there are abnormalities and you offer to remove the fetus, of course, it will create a dilemma to that person. Especially if that person is religious. Okay? Next, abortion. Like what I said earlier, abortion is illegal per se in our jurisdiction, Philippine jurisdiction. This has long been one of the most divisive issues in medical ethics. Okay? Actually, here in the Philippines, it is not divisive because in the minds of the Filipinos, abortion is not is illegal. So some proponents who wants to start medical abortion, that's why in Congress those proposals has never prospered because it is in the Filipino mindset that abortion is illegal. The same with euthanasia. So, statement on therapeutic abortion acknowledges this diversity of opinion and belief and concludes that this is a matter of individual conviction and conscience that must be respected. Okay? So, as doctors, you cannot impose your belief to your patients. Another issue is severely compromised neonates. Because of extreme prematurity or congenital abnormalities, some neonates have a very poor prognosis for survival. Difficult decisions often have to be made, whether to attempt to prolong their lives or allow them to die. In the Philippine setting class, once again, I would like to reiterate that abortion is illegal. So even though the fetus or the neonate is severely compromised, then you just let it die a natural death in the womb. Okay? Do not attempt to kill it inside the womb. Otherwise, you will be imprisoned. Okay? Next, research issues. So this include the production of new embryos or the use of spare embryos, those not wanted for reproductive purposes, to obtain stem cells for potential therapeutic applications, testing of new techniques for assisted reproduction, and experimentation on fetuses. Okay? So, of course, research, again, is very, there is an issue that would arise, especially research involving human subjects. Okay? That's why there is a declaration of Helsinki where human subjects' rights are being protected. Okay? Because, of course, they experiment on human beings. That is why the subjects which are considered vulnerable must be protected. Okay? So there are ethical considerations in these different issues class. And once again, I would like to reiterate that as doctors, you should be cautious in your decision making. So use your critical thinking, always be competent, improve your skill, knowledge, and attitude. Because of course, being doctors, the patients, the public will rely on your expertise. Okay? Next topic is the end of life issues. Okay? The beginning of life issue is very controversial. Of course, the end of life issues is more controversial because it is the end of life, the taking of the life, okay? The last step, the last breath, okay? So end of life issues range from attempts to prolong the lives of a dying patients through highly experimental technologies such as implantation of animal organs to efforts to terminate life prematurely through euthanasia and medically assisted suicide. In between these extreme lie numerous issues regarding the initiation or withdrawing of potentially life-extending treatment, the care of terminally ill patients, and the advisability and the use of advanced directives. Okay, so all these topics, class, we have discussed. We have discussed it before. Okay, euthanasia, special power of attorney, advance directive, okay, the rights of the patients, especially terminally ill patients, okay. So once again, as doctors, it is incumbent upon you to be competent, to be a competent doctor class, because you will be facing these issues every day of your professional career, okay? People will rely on your judgment. People will, everything you say as a physician will be considered a gospel truth to your patient. So that is why be competent, okay? Every day, always improve your skill, your knowledge, and your attitude, okay? So, two issues deserve particular attention, euthanasia and assisted suicide. So, by euthanasia, it means knowingly and intentionally performing an act that is clearly intended to end another person's life, and that includes the following elements. Okay, so when you say euthanasia class in its literal sense, it means mercy killing. You kill the patient because the patient, okay, wish to die, or you are the next of kin, and you don't want to see your family member to endure pain anymore. Okay, so you end the pain. However, in the Philippines class, that is not allowed. It is illegal. Okay, so the subject is a competent Informed person with an incurable illness who has voluntarily asked for his or her life to be ended. The agent knows about the person's condition and desire to die and commits the act with primary intention of ending the life of that person. And the act is undertaken with compassion and without personal gain. Okay? So this is very controversial, class. Because of course, what if, for example, your parents are very rich, okay? And of course, you want to inherit their properties. So what's the best way to do it? Especially when they are terminally ill. So some, they kill. They kill the parents in disguise of euthanasia. Okay? So that's why it is very controversial. And it needs a lot of study in order to be accepted here in the Philippines. Next is assistance in suicide. Means knowingly and intentionally providing a person with the knowledge or means or both required to commit suicide, including counseling about lethal doses of drugs, prescribing such lethal doses, or supplying the drugs. So likewise, just like euthanasia, assistance in suicide is illegal here in the Philippines. Okay? Even suicide is illegal. Okay? If you are caught committing suicide, you will be imprisoned. Okay? But of course, most of the people who commit suicide are, if not dead, they are comatose, probably. Okay? So these are just matters of reading, class. What is important that as a doctor, you must treat this issue in a case-to-case basis. Okay? According to the World Medical Association on the Statement on Physician-Assisted Suicide and Declaration on Euthanasia, it states that euthanasia, that is the act of deliberately ending the life of patient even at the patient's own request or at the behest of the patient or at the request of the close relatives, is unethical. Okay, never ethical. It is illegal even, okay, in the Philippines. This does not prevent the physician from respecting the desire of a patient to allow the natural process of death to follow its course in the terminal phase of the sickness. Okay? So these are just matters of reading, class. Okay. So earlier, class, in the previous group, I presented a scenario. Okay? And after the discussion, you will apply your critical thinking in order to come up with a how to treat, okay, how to resolve that scenario. So this is the scenario, class. I'll just read. This scenario is provided by the Ethics Committee of the World Medical Association. Okay? So case study. Dr. P, an experienced and skilled surgeon, is about to finish night duty at a medium-sized community hospital. A young woman is brought to the hospital by her mother, who leaves immediately after telling the intake nurse that she has to look after her other children. The patient is bleeding vaginally and is in a great deal of pain. Dr. P examines her and decides that she has had either a miscarriage or a self-induced abortion. He does a quick dilatation and curettage and tells the nurse to ask the patient whether she can afford to stay in the hospital until it is safe for her to be discharged. Dr. Q comes in to replace Dr. P who goes home without having spoken to the patient. Okay? So that's the scenario given. So within the course of our lecture, okay, based on the principle you have learned, this is how you treat that situation. Okay. So according to the analysis of the physician-patient relationship presented in this chapter, Dr. P's conduct was deficient in several respects. Okay, first is lack of communication. He made no attempt to communicate with the patient regarding the cost of her condition, treatment option, or her ability to afford to stay in the hospital while she recovered. Okay? Like what I said earlier, as a doctor class, be competent. Okay? Improve your skill, your knowledge, and your attitude. Remember that communication is the key class. Okay? In order for your treatment regimen to succeed. So, as a doctor, be open-minded. Remember the Declaration of Geneva. It is like a Hippocratic oath where you respect your patient. Okay? You work for the benefit of the patient, whether the patient's background, race, creed, and so on and so forth are different. Okay? So, communicate to your patient at all times. Okay? In the situation given earlier, the doctor did not say anything. Okay? Next, consent. The doctor did not obtain her informed consent to treatment. Okay, remember that informed consent today in the medical field is very important. Informed consent is not just for the protection of the patient, but also for the protection of the doctors. Okay? Because remember, class, if you committed an infraction, the three